The deep-sea search for that super yacht off Italy's coast this Tuesday night.
Our goal is to find all the people who are missing.
Why it's so dangerous for divers, new video of the vicious storm that sank it, and a first-hand account from a man who helped rescue 15 people. Inflation, deflation, what's fueling the trend and which costs are still high. From Gaza to Canada, a long-awaited family reunion. While they worry about loved ones still trapped in the war zone. Plus, high hopes.
They are disrupting our image of who can lead at the highest level.
The cautious optimism Kamala Harris can demolish the White House glass ceiling.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are watching that deep-sea search for 6 people after a luxury yacht sank in a sudden, intense storm early Monday off the coast of Sicily. Among the missing are British tech entrepreneur Mike Lynch and his 18-year-old daughter, who were celebrating his acquittal in a U.S. criminal fraud case. Specialist divers have been working in 12-minute shifts to try to get inside the cabin, but hope the missing could have survived in an air pocket is now fading. One body has been recovered. The Italian Coast Guard has said Riccardo Thomas, born in Canada and living in Antigua, was the ship's chef. Heidi Petracek reports on who else was on board that yacht and how 15 people managed to survive the violent storm that sank it.
Divers in Italy are taking on a dangerous mission, searching for passengers considered missing from British luxury yacht, the Bayesian. We are not stopping, he says. We have resources, manpower, and means. There were 22 people on board when the 56-meter vessel sank during a fierce and sudden storm Monday. Its 72-meter mast barely visible in this CCTV footage through the pounding rain. Italian officials believe that storm caused a destructive waterspout, a tornado over water.
That can generate waves, that can generate powerful winds, that can actually turn a boat on its side for a period of almost a minute.
The yacht was docked off Porticello, this photo of it taken Sunday. It's believed it sank around 4 a.m. Monday. Rescue crews then located it just under a kilometer offshore on the sea floor, 50 meters deep. 6 people are thought to be somewhere in the ship's hull.
They went flat with the mast on the water, and that they sank in 2 minutes, like they said.
This man picked up passengers from the Bayesian who were found in a life raft. 15 people survived. One body of the ship's chef, Canadian-born Riccardo Thomas, was recovered earlier. But still missing, Mike Lynch, a British tech entrepreneur, just acquitted in June of fraud charges in the U.S. after a multi-billion-dollar deal with Hewlett-Packard went sour in 2011. His daughter also unaccounted for, along with Morgan Stanley bank boss Jonathan Bloomer, other colleagues and spouses. Finding them highly technical and risky.
Diving inside an overturned vessels presents a number of dangerous challenges. The big key point is whether or not there are people inside a compartment that has oxygen.
The likelihood of their survival, he says, is slim as time keeps ticking. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
There is some positive news about the rate of inflation in Canada. It dropped from 2.7% in June to 2.5% in July. That might not sound like a lot, but it is closer to the Bank of Canada's target rate of 2% and far from the 8.1% inflation back in June of 2022. And Gaviola looks at what is behind the numbers.
Inflation extended its cooling streak in July, helped by lower prices across different categories: travel tours, passenger vehicles, electricity, clothing and footwear.
It's definitely good news for businesses, for households and for the Bank of Canada. That's the lowest it has been in over 3 years.
But it might not feel like relief because it's a comparison to last July, when the inflation picture looked much different.
Everything looks a little bit more rosy just because last July was such a shock in prices.
This reprieve on paper comes after years of price increases well above the target 2%.
Compared to last year, and particularly during the years of the pandemic, the cost of living has ballooned.
One area that remains a financial drain: shelter.
It doesn't mean we're going to get relief. It doesn't mean that you're mortgage costs are going down, it doesn't mean that your rents are going down. It really just means that the pace of increase is easing.
Paving the way for another quarter-point interest rate cut from the Bank of Canada on September 4th.
3 more cuts for the remainder of the year, September, October, and December. Likely another 3 to 4 cuts to come in 2025.
The American Central Bank is widely expected to start cutting its benchmark interest rate in September too, which spells some relief for fixed-rate mortgage holders up for renewal. Those mortgages are influenced by the bond market and the Federal Reserve's decisions more than our central bank. Donna?
All right, and Gaviola in Toronto, thank you. Traffic on Canada's 2 biggest and busiest rail networks could grind to a halt on Thursday. The looming strike action by CN and Canadian Pacific Kansas City is expected to derail the delivery of goods as well as affect more than 30,000 commuters who rely on rail in Canada's 3 biggest cities. As Mackenzie Gray reports, railways are a critical link in the supply chain for just about everything, and things are already slowing down.
It's not official yet, but the unprecedented rail stoppage is now functionally underway. Canadian Pacific banning any new shipments as of 12:01 Tuesday morning. CN set to do the same come Wednesday ahead of a complete shutdown.
On Thursday morning, nothing is going to be moving anymore. And this is strictly because the union has refused to engage with us.
Both railways and over 9,000 Teamster union members can agree on scheduling or safety concerns, putting at risk over $1 billion worth of goods each day. Like canola and potash, Canada, the world's largest producer of both.
The best resolution of this is going to come from sitting down at the table and working it out.
A sentiment shared by Labour Minister Steve McKinnon, who met with CN and the Teamsters today after previously rejecting CN's request for binding arbitration.
We hope that the minister will reconsider his position and act accordingly.
Instead, allowing for last-second negotiations to carry on, which could soon lead to shortages.
Goods that we might have come to expect to be on the shelves may be in shorter supply or may be absent altogether.
Commuters could also be absent from work in Canada's largest cities. A rail shutdown would close GO train lines impacting Hamilton, Milton, and Mississauga, cancel the West Coast Express connecting Vancouver and the eastern suburbs, plus suspend service on 3 Montreal trains. Potentially 32,000 riders impacted across the country. Via Rail also hit, potentially cancelling service to 30 different communities in Northern Ontario.
It's really hard to take a train that moves thousands of people around and try to put the people in buses.
American companies also now taking action, with multiple railways cancelling shipments to and through Canada, Donna, and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce is now calling for Canadian government intervention to avoid a shutdown.
Mackenzie, thanks. Quebec Premier François Legault is putting a 6-month freeze on the intake of new low-wage temporary foreign workers in Montreal. He says the number has doubled to 600,000 people in 2 years. And that's putting a strain on housing, social services, health, education, and the French language.
We've seen in the last years that there's a decrease about every 5 years. That's the statistic we have in the percentage of Francophone. So I think it's important for the future of French also to reduce this number.
The freeze starts in September and applies to new applications and renewals. Exemptions will include nurses, teachers, construction workers, food production employees, and those who are paid more than $57,000 a year. In the U.S., Democrats are rallying around Kamala Harris at the party's national convention in Chicago.
Get the celebration started! Delaware, how do you cast your vote?
On behalf of the great state of Delaware, home of our beloved 46th President of the United States, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr.
It is our honor to unanimously cast our 34 votes for the next President of the United States, Vice President Kamala Harris!
That was the start of the ceremonial roll call. Kamala Harris officially became the nominee after a virtual vote earlier this month. Having her at the top of the ticket has reinvigorated the Democratic Party, and the man who stepped aside to make it possible is now helping her define the stark choice voters have to make in November. Jackson Prosco is at the Democratic Convention in Chicago. Jackson.
Well, Donna, Joe Biden is really trying to draw the contrast between Harris and her opponent, Donald Trump. But what is so stark and so obvious at this convention is the contrast between Biden and Harris. The first glimpse of a party transformed came during an unexpected walkout by Kamala Harris Monday night.
Good evening, everyone.
Even she seemed surprised by the reception as she thanked the man who made it all possible.
Joe, thank you for your historic leadership, for your lifetime of service to our nation.
Soon after, President Joe Biden took the stage, wiping away tears before delivering his own political eulogy.
It's been the honor of my lifetime to serve as your president. I love the job, but I love my country more.
All of this would have been unthinkable just 1 month ago, when delegates were still pledged to Biden and expecting a straightforward renomination. Yet on the floor, it's hard to find anyone unhappy with this convention surprise.
I think we're thrilled, which is different than being surprised. I think she did bring us all together, which is really wonderful.
What Democrats have found in Chicago is the kind of energy that has eluded the party for almost 2 decades.
And so that's what you're feeling. You feel hope and optimism, and we can have a better America. Like that's everybody's included. So yeah, I feel hope. I feel hopeful.
Hopeful because Harris has upended the race, potentially putting new states like North Carolina in play this November.
I'm uber excited and hopeful that we are able to turn the tide and win this state for her.
She has also become an attractive alternative for moderate voters. The convention will hear from several Republicans and former members of the Trump administration, something else that might have been unthinkable just weeks ago. We talk about the level of enthusiasm being a bit of a throwback here, Donna, and to that point, tonight's featured speakers, former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama, of course, the last people to generate the amount of enthusiasm that Harris herself has generated.
And Jackson, Kamala Harris certainly has a lot of momentum. What is Donald Trump doing to try to counter any gains she might be making?
Well, he's counter-programming with daily events. Today, he was in the town of Howell, Michigan, for a speech on law and order. The problem was this was overshadowed first by the venue. This is a town with a long history of ties to the KKK. And secondly, overshadowed by the fact that Trump has such a hard time staying on message. And once again, he veered off into personal attacks against Harris and rambling statements that had nothing to do with what today's event was supposed to have been about.
Okay, Jackson in Chicago tonight. Thanks. As Ukraine advances further into Russia in its new incursion to create a buffer zone, overnight Russian forces launched a barrage of strikes deep inside Ukraine, hitting critical energy infrastructure in the country's north, and that caused blackouts for more than 18,000 people in 72 settlements. Russian forces also hit civilian targets. One attack near a playground in the southern city in the Zaporizhia region killed a 14-year-old boy. Ukraine's Air Force says ballistic missiles and drones targeted 9 regions across Ukraine. A long-awaited reunion coming up. A family who escaped the war in Gaza and just arrived in Canada. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue the war against Hamas until it is destroyed, and he promised to bring the Israeli hostages home. That is becoming increasingly difficult. The Israeli government now estimates a third of the 110 captives still held by Hamas in Gaza are dead. Overnight, Israeli soldiers moved into a location in southern Gaza and recovered the bodies of 6 more hostages. It's not clear how they died, though Hamas says some captives have been killed or wounded in Israeli airstrikes. Today, the target of one of those airstrikes was a school where hundreds of displaced people were sheltering. And a warning, the video of the aftermath is disturbing.
Ya Allah, Ya Allah, Ya Allah.
At least 12 Palestinians were killed. Rescue crews tried to reach others believed to be trapped under the rubble. The IDF claims it was targeting a Hamas command center inside that school. There is no place in Gaza that is truly safe, and getting out of there is incredibly difficult. Tonight, 2 Palestinians who did manage to get out are in Calgary. They've reunited with family. As Heather Yurix-West explains, their story is one of joy and relief after a long, bureaucratic and costly journey.
A young boy runs into the arms of his waiting uncle as 2 sisters share a long, delayed embrace. This is joy and relief. for a Calgary family who had feared they would never hold these loved ones close ever again. The last 10 months have been the hardest of my 38 years of life, says Abdallah Dawood. That's because this was home, Gaza City, in ruins now after months of bombardment. The Dawood siblings were lucky to escape. Not every member of this family did. Last October, an Israeli airstrike hit an apartment building where Tamer Jarada's family was sheltering. His parents and 2 sisters were among 17 relatives killed. Jarada's wife's parents remain trapped in Gaza still.
Yeah, my father is still in there, and he's sick, and he can't find any, medical attention.
In January, the Canadian government introduced a special temporary visa program for Gazans with family in Canada. But navigating this pathway has been incredibly difficult and slow. Completing the application alone has required tens of thousands of dollars paid to private Egyptian operatives just to get out of the region. Hello.
That's everyone.
The family did this for 9 other relatives, including 5 children last spring. 4 months later, they continue to wait.
My nephews were so excited about coming to Canada and getting to school. It's just still 10 days until school start here, and nothing significant happened with their visa applications.
According to Ottawa, of the more than 3,700 visa applications made under this program, only about 200 Gazans have come to Canada so far.
Come together!
Making this moment of happiness all the more special because of how rare these reunions really are.
1, 2, 3!
Heather Yerkes-West, Global News, Calgary.
Free-falling reputation ahead, the new safety problems for Boeing. That is not supposed to happen. This rocket engine burst into flames during a test at the UK's new Spaceport on a remote Scottish island. No one was injured and the launch pad has been saved. It hopes to become the first fully licensed spaceport in Western Europe able to launch vertically into orbit. There's more trouble for Boeing. The American Federal Aviation Administration has ordered the inspection of all Boeing 787 Dreamliners after an incident in March when a LATAM Airlines plane went into a sudden nosedive that injured more than 50 passengers. The FAA says the dive happened because a seat in the cockpit jolted forward and disconnected the autopilot system. There have been 4 other reports of similar issues with the 787s this year. The inspection will look at the captain and first officer's seats and cracked switch cover assemblies. Boeing has also grounded its test fleet of 777X planes after finding damage in one of the jetliner's structures. The company says it discovered the damage to a custom part between the engine and airplane structure during scheduled maintenance. It's not clear if the problem will delay deliveries of the 777Xs, which are supposed to start in 2025, but are already years behind schedule. Daring to dream. Next, can Kamala Harris go where no woman has gone before in American politics? There's a lot of energy around the campaign of Kamala Harris right now. Those who support her are hopeful history will be made rather than repeated this November. According to the polls right now, Harris could beat Republican nominee Donald Trump and become the first woman to occupy the Oval Office. But the experience of the only other woman to get this close is a cautionary tale, as Eric Sorensen reports.
As the 46th U.S. president, and they've all been men, passed the torch to Kamala Harris, the daunting history she faces is obvious. Will the United States elect a woman to be president for the first time?
Thank you so much.
Hillary Clinton knows well the uphill battle. Even a woman's right to vote is recent.
That changed 104 years ago yesterday. Think about it.
In those 100 years, it is a short list of women who've even had a chance to win election to the White House.
The new heavyweight debater.
In 1984, Geraldine Ferraro was the first woman on the presidential ticket of a major party. Her VP selection was always a long shot. Sarah Palin was the second, also a surprise choice, also a failed one. Clinton came closest to breaking the so-called glass ceiling, and Harris, the first female vice president, has the chance to go through it.
They are disrupting our image of who can lead at the highest level.
Debbie Walsh believes America is more ready now for a woman to lead.
even in these 8 years, we saw record numbers of women getting politically engaged.
And there is something more to engage American women: the loss of reproductive freedoms.
We all know he will sign a national abortion ban.
To stop Donald Trump and new abortion restrictions, what better candidate than a woman?
We are not going to let that happen because we trust women.
She is running at a time when there is an issue that touches women's lives deeply and personally and mobilizes them.
Hillary Clinton sees a breakthrough coming.
On the other side of that glass ceiling is Kamala Harris raising her hand and taking the oath of office.
Women have historically faced prejudice and sexism to win political office. But in 2024, a woman at the top of the Democratic ticket may be just the ticket. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Tuesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is Chilliwack, British Columbia. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.